Uh, Valid. Orphans who relied upon a householder or their father appointed an administrator for them, he is obligated to tithe their produce. An administrator appointed by the orphan's father must swear. If appointed by the court, he must not swear. Al says the reverse is true. One who ritually contaminates another's food or one who mixes it with truma or offers another's wine as a libation for idol worship, if he did it inadvertently, he is not liable. If deliberately, he is liable. Kohanim who deliberately related an offering in the statuary pickle are liable. Um, Rabbi Yochanan ben Guda testified that a deaf-mute girl whose father married her off can be divorced with a get, and that a minor, the daughter of a non-Kohen who was married to a Kohen, may eat truma. And if she dies, her husband inherits her, and that for a stolen beam which was built into a large building. He shall take its value for the sake of penitence, and then a stolen sin offering whose statue was not known to the public atones for the sake of the altar. There were no extortionists in of land in Judea um, in the time who slain of war. From the time of the slain of war went onward, there were extortionists there. How? If one bought from the extortionist and then bought from the owner, his purchase is void. From the owner and then from the extortionist, his purchase is valid. If he bought from the husband and then bought from his wife, his purchase is void. From the wife and then from the husband, his purchase is valid. This is the original ruling. The court that came after them said, one who buys from an extortionist gives the owner one fourth. When is this? When do not have with what to buy. But if they have with what to buy, they take precedence over any person. Rebbe convinced the court, and they voted and enacted it that it remained with the extortionist 12 months. Whoever is first to buy it acquires it, but it gives the owner one fourth. Okay.
Okay. Other things that were other takanas that Chachamim made. Cheresh, Romez Venirmaz, so a deaf mute, who we generally say does not have das to perform certain actions, but nonetheless, if he wants to, the guy's got to be able to make a transaction. He's got to go to the supermarket and buy food. So if he can, if he can gesture and he can respond to gestures, then using that kind of sign language, that's good enough for him to buy to make purchases and conduct transactions, right? Uben Betero mer kofetz v'nikpat. So Ben Betero also adds in not just from gestures and sign language, but also even from by lip reading, by mouthing words. Even that's good enough. The Tanakama says lip reading is not enough for him to make the it's not good enough for him to make the gestures with his mouth. He must actually signal in a clearer way that people can see. Okay, this is all with metaltalin. Okay, that's things can be moved, but nonetheless, a cherish has no capacity to make transactions with landed goods. Yeah, with landed property. Paotos, similarly with children. So children from the age of 7 depends on the child, what his level of understanding is. But you can have a bright kid at 7 years old who knows what a transaction is. Mikran mekach mimkaran mimkar b'metaltalin. So also they can make financial transactions when it comes to buying and selling movable goods. Okay, this was put in place so that orphans are able to make a deal for themselves and look after themselves if they're old enough to do so. Again, not with land. We just with things that they need for day to day, buying food from the supermarket, whatever. Okay, Mishna Ches. Elu dvarim amru mipnei darchei shalom. So there were certain things that Chazal permitted because of wanting to keep peaceful relations. Kohen, Kore Rishon, V'achrav Levi, V'achrav Yisrael. So just a hard and fast rule when it comes to calling up people to the Torah, you call the Kohen first. Okay, and the coin doesn't have the right to be mevater. If he's the only coin in the shul, and he says, no, 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 rather call the Rav. The Rav is much more chashuv than me. He does not have the right to be mevater. This is something that Chazal said you have to give it to the coin, so that people don't start arguing. Say, oh, how could he give it to this guy? The other guy's more worthy. You just don't get into arguments. It's always coin, always then a Levi, always then Israel. Okay. And of course, the rules that fall over if there's no Levi, then the coin gets called twice. And okay, mipnei darkei shalom. So this is just to keep the peace among people. Ma'arvin bebayis yashan. So let's say you've got a bunch of houses together around a courtyard, and they want to make an erev chatzeros between them. So whichever house is the one that they started the erev in, that's the one that they must continue to keep the erev food in. Okay, they don't. So if the guy sells and somebody else buys, it stays in the same house because we just want to keep things in the same place. And if the food gets lost or whatever, if it moves to somewhere else and somebody comes and didn't know what happened, he's going to look and say, oh, there's no food here, we're busy carrying in an area that's not kosher. Just make sure that it stays in the same place. That was the explanation that I saw in ArtScroll. Actually, I would have thought that it was just sort of like an Avram Avinu thing, where Avram Avinu went down to Mitzrayim and he stayed at a certain inn, and then his way back from Mitzrayim he went back to the same inn because he didn't want there to be any sort of whispering that either he didn't like the inn and therefore the innkeeper would lose business, or that the innkeeper wouldn't have him back, and that he was not such a good guest. So that just as a matter of principle, and uh, my son-in-law was telling me also that his grandfather, alav hashalom, was like he had a principle that he shopped at a certain supermarket, and if there was another supermarket that came and had cheaper prices, it didn't matter. He shopped at his supermarket because he didn't want anyone to be saying that the supermarket's not good enough or anything like that. Same sort of a principle. Anyway, Darke Shalom. Bor shehu karov la'ama mismale rishon. Situation is that you've got a stream running through a little town, and people have got their own little cisterns where they store water for their personal use. Of course, this is in the days where you don't have running water, so if you want water, you've got to fill up your cistern from the stream. So who's got the right to fill up first is the one who's furthest upstream. Now that would seem like totally logical, um, but
Yeah.
it might. I was thinking like, I mean, that's just physics. That's what's going to happen is that the one that's upstream is going to fill up first. But that's if it's naturally flowing from the stream into the cistern. What, but it might be that if there's it might be that if it's not actually connecting. And the time that you'd be arguing about this is if the water's not flowing so strongly and it's not flowing directly into the cistern. So now are all the people going to start hitting
Right.
each other and saying, I want to fill up the water, I want to fill up water. So the rule is whoever's upstream, he goes and fills up his buckets and fills up his cistern, and then whoever comes next comes next. Okay, so that's also a Takanas Chazal.
Hmm.
Right, so that mitmale rishon mipnei darkei shalom. Metzudos chayav ofos v'dagim yesh b'hem mishum gezel mipnei darkei shalom. Okay, so if you've left out traps to catch birds or animals to shech them, um, the traps themselves don't constitute a kinyan, because all that you've done is you've trapped an animal in place, but it's out in the Rishus Harabim or in Carmelis. It's in nobody's property. It's just that it's caught in your trap. So that it hasn't made a complete kinyan. So technically, somebody else could come and say, "Oh, look, there's an animal caught in the trap." He grabs it for himself, shechts it, and takes it home because no, it didn't make a kinyan. Chazal said, "This is a takana. We are not going to allow you to do this. Once it's caught in somebody's trap, it's considered like his property." Okay, because of Darkei Shalom, because we don't want people going and grabbing things from each other's traps. Rabbi Yossi Omer Gazal Gamor. He says no. This is literally Gezel. He says that the trap itself does acquire for the owner. and the nafkamina between Rabbi Yossi and the Tanakama is that if somebody did go ahead and ignore this takana and take it, we can't extract it from him according to the Tanakama. According to Rabbi Yossi, could take him to Beis Din and say that's my animal and force him to give it back. Okay. Matthias Cheresh Shotiv Katan. Cheresh Shotiv Katan, remember they don't have proper das, and they find something that was hefker and they pick it up, and somebody else comes and says, "Hey, you don't have das to be kona," and they grab it off him. So that technically they could do because the Cheresh Shotiv Katan cannot make a kinyan. Except that Chazal said, no, you cannot do that. That's again Mishum Darkei Shalom, and people shouldn't start grabbing things from people who love Bardas. Again, Rabbi Yossi comes and says, Gezel Gamor. It's not just a gezerah. This is literally Gezel, and they could claim it back in court. Ani ha menakef barosh hazayis. So it's payah season, and the poor guy has climbed up to the top of the olive tree to try and get some olives off there, and he's shaking the branch. He's put a blanket on the ground, and he shakes the branch to get the olives to fall onto the blanket. And while he's up at the top of the tree, somebody else comes past and says, "Oh, thanks for knocking down those olives. I'll take those." He hasn't made a kinyan, so they're not. So technically they're not his yet, and therefore Mekiradin he's allowed to do that. Again, we have a takana darkei shalom that you cannot do that. And Rabbi Yossi again comes and says, no, this is Gezel Gamor, and you would be able to claim it back in court if somebody took it. Ein memachin biyad aniyei goyim beleket of shicha v'peah mipnei darkei shalom. Furthermore, we also do not prevent the non-Jewish poor from coming and taking the matanos to the poor, that is leket shicha and peah. Technically speaking, it's meant to be only for Jewish aniyim, but we certainly don't prevent non-Jewish aniyim from coming to collect because we want to keep peace with the neighbors. Yeah. Mishna Tes. Masheles isha lechaverta hakashuda ala shviyis. So you have a person who is suspected of not being shomer shviyis. In this particular case, we're talking about where somebody is held onto Shemitah produce beyond the date of biur without being mafkirat. So we don't know if they're keeping the halacha properly, but nonetheless, a woman is allowed to lend the following kalim to her friend: a sieve, a nafa, a kavara, a different kind of a sifter, and rechaim, and a hand mill, a tanner, and even a small portable oven. Okay, so if she does what she does, if she does violate Shavias, that's her business. Lending her the kalim is not a problem because it's an ambiguous thing. She might be doing okay, she might not be doing okay. Okay, but she cannot come and actually work with her together, because then she is actually actively assisting in committing an avera if the other woman is committing an avera. Similarly, Eishes Chaver Masheles leEishes Amaretz. She can all, in not talking about Shvius, we're talking now about halachas of Tuma and Tara. The assumption is that an Amaretz is not careful about Tuma and Tara. Okay, so again, she can lend to the sifter and the sieve and the boreris, and she may sift and grind and mirakedis is make you make the flour dance to separate out there are different ways of sifting the flour and getting the good flour out. Okay, so all the time they're allowed to work together. Aval mishet tatil hamayim, once she adds the water. Now the water is what makes it susceptible to tumah. And because you're still going to be taking challah out of this dough, and you want to keep the dough batara, in order to be able to give challah to the kohen properly, since the Eishes Amaretz is not going to be careful in Tumah and Tara, this is now assisting her to do an avera, which is being matame the dough that's going to have challah taken out of it. Okay, mishitat lemayim lo tigayma. She may not touch with it. V'lefisha ein machzik yaday over avera. Because you can't help people who are doing an avera. You can help them up to the point where it's ambiguous, but up to after that point, no collaboration. V'chulan lo amru ela mipnei darkei shalom. And all of these heterim that they had up until now were only because of darkei shalom, because we don't want to create bad vibes between people. So we try and be as lenient as possible on the Ami Haaretz, um, but not too lenient. Umachzikin yedei goyim b'shvius. And furthermore, non-Jews who are farming the land during the Shemitah year, you're allowed to encourage them. Say, yeah, hope you have a good harvest. Because it's not their mitzvah to keep Shvius. Aval lo yidei Israel, but you cannot encourage a Jewish farmer during Shvius. If he's farming, you can't say anything nice about it and say, "Oh, I hope you have a good harvest." At best, you just ignore him. If you won't listen to a tochacha, then you have to just ignore him. V'shoalin bishloman mipnei darkei shalom, and you're also even allowed to use Hashem's name to greet the name of Shalom. So you're allowed to say Shalom to a non-Jew because this is Darkei Shalom. You want to keep good relations with the neighbors. Okay, let's do Chazaras. I will have to leave early because I'm going into the office soon. But let's
Zion, Zion,
yeah.
but Zion. Even those whose women are not trusted to say her husband had died are trusted to bring her get. Her mother-in-law's daughter, her co-wife, her husband's brother's wife, and her brother's daughter, a husband's daughter. What is the difference between a get and a testimony of death? That the written testimony is that the written test document is evidence. The woman herself may bring her own get, but she must say it was written in my presence and signed in my presence. Any get which is written without a specific intent for a particular reason woman is void. How is this amplified? If a man was passing through the street and heard the sound of scribes dictating so and so is divorcing so and so from such and such a place, and he said, "That is my name and that is my wife's name," it is void for executing a divorce with it. Moreover, if he wrote a get with which his divorced his wife, and he changed his mind, and a man of the city met him and said to him, "My name is like yours, like your name, and my wife's name is like your wife's name," it is void for executing a divorce with it. Moreover, if he had two wives whose names were alike, and he wrote a get to divorce the elder, he cannot divorce the younger with it. Moreover, if he said to the scribe, "Write a get, and I will divorce whichever one I want," it is void to executing a divorce with it. One who writes Tofim of Gittin must leave blank the space for the name of the man and the space for the name of the woman. And the space for the date on documents of loans, he must leave blank the space for the name of the lender, the space for the lender, the borrower, the space for the amount of money, and the space for the date on bills of sale. He must leave blank the space for the name of the buyer, the space for the name of the will seller, the space for the amount of money, and the space for the field, and the space for the date. For the sake of the benefit involved, Yehuda invalidates all of them. Reb Elazar validates all of them except for Gittin, for it is written, "He shall write for her with specific intent for her."
Okay.
If one,
That's
right?
it. Yeah.
That's it.
Nazir.
Okay. Um, so, Nazir is Zion Aleph. A Kohen Gadol and a Nazir may not come tummy off of contact with their relatives, but they may become tummy with an abandoned corpse. If they were traveling on the way and they found an abandoned corpse, Azaliah says the Kohen Gadol should become tummy, but the Nazir should not become tummy. But the sages say the Nazir should become tummy, but the Kohen Gadol should not become tummy. Reb Eliezer said to them, the Kohen should become tummy since he does not bring a sacrifice for his tumah, but the Nazir should not become tummy because he brings a sacrifice for his tumah. They said to him, the Nazir should become tummy since his sanctity is not everlasting, but the Kohen should not become tummy since his sanctity is everlasting. The combination from the following sources of tumah, the Nazir must shave for a corpse, or an olive bulk of corpse, or an olive bulk of netzel, and a ladle full of decayed corpse to the spinal column, or the skull, or a limb severed from a corpse, or a limb severed from a living body that has on it sufficient flesh, or half a fob of bones, or half a log of bone, of blood. Whether the contamination is not transmitted by contact, carrying, or a raw roof, or for tumor from a bone the size of a barley grain, whether the contamination is transmitted by contact or by carrying. For these another shaves, sprinkles on his third and seventh day, forfeits the perfect save, and does not resume counting until he becomes Sameh and Taho and brings his sacrifices. But Gimel, tumah contaminated by branchly canopies or illusions in a field on which a grave has been plowed over, on the land, the nations of the coffin cover or the coffin, or a quarter log of blood, or a tent, or a quarter cup of bones, or utensils that touch a corpse in the days of the Mitzvah's counting, or the days of from Saras. For those the Nazir does not shave, but he is sprinkled on the third and seventh days, and does not forfeit the preceding days. And he begins to count right away, and he is not sacrificed. There's not no sacrifice. In truth, he said, the days of Azav or Azava are the days of confinement of the Mitzvah. These are counted for him.
Okay.
Okay.
At this point, I'm going to have to duck.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
There was a mistake, by the way, in Yevamos. I don't understand what